Let's look at some of these. Okay, let's start with Winnie the Pooh here. Okay, wonderful case of learning disabilities. Right? You notice his spelling. Right? Winnie the Pooh's real name. Anyway, Pooh is a nickname. But these are things that, again, often start overlapping with speech because any type of processing disorder falls under the learning disabilities umbrella, right? So things like dysphagia or aphasia, visual and auditory processing disorders, sensory processing disorders, and of course, dyscalculia, dysgraphia, dyslexia, like the standards. And a lot of people just call all learning disabilities dyslexia, this entire processing thing, even though dyslexia is specifically what? Reading. It's specifically a reading disability. But it's because with any type of processing disorder, what's happening is, how do humans get information? We have only one way of getting information. What is it? How do we bring in information?
Our senses.
Thank you. Our senses are the only way we can bring in information. And so with a processing disorder, there is something going on with either the bringing in of through the sense, or once it's brought into the brain, because we only have one sense organ. Okay, we smell with our brain, we see with our brain, we hear with our brain, we taste with our brain. And I could play all kinds of weird mind games with you to show you that that's actually what's going on. But the touch or the taste or the smell or the visual reading, something's happening on the way to getting it stored, on the way to retrieval, on the way to expression of the retrieval. Something's happening along that process, and that's where the processing disorder comes in. And yet, can you be grateful for it? Absolutely. If you ever watch Pirates of the Caribbean, all three of the main leads, somebody was talking about the Pirates of the Caribbean theme. So Johnny Depp, Keira Knightley, and Orlando Bloom all have dyslexia. Johnny Depp's probably also autistic, for the record. I don't know if he's ever been diagnosed, but he's diagnosed dyslexic. And here's Orlando Bloom talking about how dyslexia is awesome.
If you have a child with dyslexia, it's really learning what is their superpower. Every child has a superpower. If you're dyslexic, it's kind of your superpower. It's like the way that you think. So then you just need to be given tools and opportunities and learning, like passion-based learning, you know? And if education is a challenge for a child with dyslexia, you need to understand how to educate them so that it isn't a challenge, so that it's fun, because it's not that they're stupid, it's not that they're not capable. They just need to learn how to enjoy the process of learning.
I don't have time to run through the whole clip. If you want to see the interview, it's on YouTube, it's free. You can also watch it on the videos when you get this PowerPoint. But what stage is that? That's 5, that's transformation, right? Because autism, or not autism, dyslexia is my superpower. And we just have to learn how to help kids focus their superpower. And it really can be. So many incredibly talented people have processing disorders. And even my inability to play sports is probably not my autism so much as I have a physical bodily kinesthetic intelligence learning disorder. If you guys know, like, Gardner's multiple intelligences, people know that? Okay, learning disorders happen in any one of those 8, right? That's how they happen. But because the brain is wired differently there and has at least one mode that is a weakness, what it means usually is the brain has created strengths in the other modes. And so people with learning disabilities tend to be really good at thinking in big picture, which is not necessarily a strength of autism. They tend to be really good at bodily kinesthetic processing, unless they're like me and have a bodily kinesthetic disability. They tend to be very creative, be able to think on their feet really well, and be really empathetic toward others who've had these challenges. Again, if I had time, I would show you some of these videos and watch how, again, people's hearts are softened and how much love they have for others with disabilities and challenges because of what they went through. Steven Spielberg wrote The Goonies because he was that kid. He was like, if they're going to call on me to read again today, this is going to be one more day in a long succession of days that were the worst day of my life. And he hated school. He finally finished college in his 60s just to kind of show his kids that he could do it, and show himself. But he just felt terrible and unvalued because of that, but he's got a lot of empathy for the outcasts, for the goons in the world. Imagination, again, intelligence. Just to have a processing disorder, it means there's a disconnect between what your expected performance is and what your performance is. Narrative reasoning, so they're good at stories and telling stories and thinking of things in stories. Like I said, use stories to teach. They tend to be more resilient to actually have better social skills, again, unless that's their area of processing problems. Verbal reasoning and visual spatial processing, again, one of these processing areas is going to be a strength for them. They're not going to have a deficit in all 8. Even if it's a relative strength. You don't have to be the best in the world at something to have a strength, right? We don't all have to be Taylor Swift to sing, right? Okay? I just heard that she got like all the top 10. I don't actually listen to Taylor Swift, but I'm not cool enough. But again, you don't have to be Taylor Swift to be a successful singer. You can be all kinds of other people or just sing for fun. So if you're working with these students who have processing disorders, make sure that you're trying not to embarrass them because they are ashamed of this area of weakness. They know that they're not good at this. And you're going to see behavioral problems when you're trying to work on that because they don't want to show anybody this weakness. They know that this has just been an area that people have picked on, teased, that they've beat themselves up over. And so try to ask for volunteers. Again, use as much autonomy for them as possible and help them show off their strengths. Give them a chance to shine in a way that's really good, that even can maybe show other kids how good they are. Give them extra time to process because what they're having to do is like, who in here knows a foreign language? Like a few people studied foreign languages. Okay, so I remember learning Japanese and your brain, when you're learning a foreign language, you have to take in the phrase, translate it to your native language, come up with a response in your native language, translate your native response to the foreign language, and then say it in the foreign language. So by the time, someone asks me in Japanese, like, "O genki desu ka?" I'm like, "Oh, okay, that means, how am I feeling today? I guess I'm feeling okay. So how would I say I'm feeling good? Okay, so I'm feeling good, and I'm going to say that in Japanese. Oh, genki desu yo. Okay, I'm going to say," and by the time I say that, it's people are already saying, well, good evening, and, and they've already left, right? Give them extra time. Take the amount of time you think it should take and double that, or triple that, or even square that, okay? And then make sure you're using other senses. If you're using just one sense and they're having a lot of problems, it's probably because there's a processing disorder in that sensory modality. Use other sensory modalities. Bring those in. Make it visual, make it auditory, make it tactile, make it movement-based, and watch how much better it goes. A lot of people are very different when you change the modality. All of a sudden, you're accessing that brain that is the really only sense organ we have. And then break those tasks down into really manageable, tiny slivers so they can have success. And then repeat that and repeat that and repeat that, the task analysis piece. Other tips people have as you're working with students with processing disorders, something that's worked really good in your practice that you'd want to share, that you wish someone had told you when you were starting out as a speech therapist. I keep seeing movement of people scratching and uncomfortably shuffling, and so I'm going to accidentally call on folks here. Okay, we're there. Don't let them believe that they're a bear of very little brain, okay? They're awesome. Now, let's talk about our Tiggers, right? The ADHD people of the world. And again, this is where there is a lot of problems with forgetfulness and losing things, distraction, hyperactivity, disinhibition, right? You saw on the one video they were talking about famous people with ADHD, and they showed Will Smith. Again, he's been very successful jumping from career to career and role to role. And he still has impulse control problems, as you may have noticed at the Oscars, okay? All right? And again, he feels terrible about it. It is what it is. But can you reach transformation on ADHD? Absolutely you can. 40% of Fortune 500 CEOs have ADHD. 40%. And this is my favorite ADHD YouTuber. This is Jessica McCabe. She runs a channel called How to ADHD. And I absolutely love her approach and her little short videos that are very ADHD friendly and also just good for autism and all other neurodiversities. But somebody asked her about, wait, so can you be glad you have ADHD? And here she goes.
Hello, brain. ADHD. My favorite aunt had it too, so when I was diagnosed as a kid, it was like getting to join this cool club. But after a year of research, I've discovered it's responsible for a lot of challenges that I didn't realize. I still love my ADHD brain, but some days when I'm sleep deprived, when my symptoms are worse than usual, and I'm buried under piles of research talking about the potential negative consequences of having ADHD, I have to wonder, would I rather not have it? It's easy to fall into that kind of thinking when you're focused more on what you've done wrong than what you've done right. But as somebody told me recently, ADHD is not a failed version of normal. Our brains just work differently, and with those differences come a lot of strengths. So yeah, even on my worst days, I'm glad I have ADHD. And here's why. Here are my 10 favorite things about being a brain. Number 10, we are enthusiastic. Does this mean we might talk over you some? Absolutely. But it also means we give the biggest hugs, get excited about the smallest successes, and you'll never have to worry about awkward silence. Number 9, we're willing to take risks. Yes, this can mean we burn ourselves with steamers sometimes, but it also means we jump headfirst into challenges and opportunities when others would rather play it safe. According to my research, ADHDers are 300% more likely to take the risk of starting their own business, and sometimes those risks pay off. Number 8, we're resilient. Failing a million times means coming out stronger. Things not going according to plan is just another day at the office. So when everybody else is freaking out, we are working on solutions. Number 7, we are funny. Failing a million times also means developing a sense of humor. You can't walk into walls, pull your keys out of the freezer, or show up 15 minutes late to work on your day off, again, without learning to laugh about it. That sense of humor not only helps us get through our challenges, but makes life fun for everyone else around us. Number 6, we're generous. I've never met an ADHDer who wasn't willing to help when somebody needed them. You don't have to go very far to see that for yourself. We have the best community on YouTube, and that's because of your generosity in sharing your own experiences and helping other people through theirs. Number 5, we're creative. We create stuff, whether this comes naturally or is something we develop as a result of having to find our way in a world that's not built the way we are. ADHDers tend to think outside the box, find solutions where other people see walls, and are generally pretty imaginative. We love to create, and our constant stream of ideas might make it hard to finish any one of them, but the fact that we get bored easily and seek novelty means the things that we do create tend to be pretty cool. Number 4, we're forgiving. We aren't perfect, and we don't expect anybody else to be. You're running late? Me too. Said something you didn't mean? It's okay. I've been there. Forgot to message me back? It's fine. I love you anyway. We've learned, or are still learning, that being a good person doesn't mean you never mess up. So just let us know you care and don't worry about being perfect. We'd probably get bored if you were. Number 3, we can hyperfocus. Yes, technically hyperfocus is an inability to switch our attention when we probably should. It's also how I can write for 10 hours straight or stay up all night researching how ADHD affects our ability to sleep. Accomplishing anything worthwhile means doing a lot of work. And when we are passionate about something, a lot of work is not a problem for us. In fact, a lot of creative types credit their success to their ADHD for this reason. And they say ADHDers are lazy. Number 673. We're full of surprises. You never know what we're gonna say, and we never know what we're gonna find when we finally clean our room. With us, everyday life is an adventure. And my number 1 reason I love having ADHD, drum roll, Edward. Thank you. Number 1, we are not alone. If I had to be the only person in the world with ADHD, I might get tired of being singled out and feeling misunderstood. But I'm not. I'm not alone. I have you. We have each other. We have doctors who have it and understand what we need. There are champions who have it and can remind us that ADHD doesn't have to hold you back. There are ADHDers who coach, who create organizational systems, who teach, who are friends that can understand. So yeah, even on my worst days, and yeah, I have them too. I'm proud to be part of this tribe, and I wouldn't give it up if I could.
I'm proud to be ADHD, and she has some really great reasons. The research shows a ton of strengths, and again, your handouts have all of these. But, you know, Tigers are adventurous, animated, artistic, creative, curious, energetic, flexible, fun, right? And bouncy and trouncy and all those things. But if you're working with the person with ADHD, you're going to need to, again, move things up and have planned distractions and give them things they can fidget with. And it also is helpful to help them learn ways to calm themselves and regulate themselves, because so often that self-regulation is the real disability with ADHD. So as you're teaching them to communicate, also teach them to be aware of their own communication, their own bodies and their own minds, and how they can maybe plug into that a little bit better. Organizational aids, especially visual aids, can be really helpful. Medication, this is one of the big differences between ADHD and a lot of others. There's no pill for learning disabilities. There's no pill for autism. There are some really good pills for ADHD. Again, so something that you can advise families to go explore with the doctor. And then teaching them direct systems, like this is how we're going to do the thing, and this is step 1, step 2, step 3, and we're going to drill those until this becomes habitual. But some cool systems that can help them not lose stuff. I had an ADHD coach one time I was listening to, and I'm like, I don't have ADHD. But he's like, I lose stuff all the time. And I'm like, I lose stuff all the time. So it's different with autism, but the effect is the same. And he's like, so every time I walk through a door, I check. I walk through the door and I'm like, oh, do I have my stuff? Did I leave anything behind? And it's like just a natural cue every time I walk through the door. And all of a sudden, I started employing that in my life, and I very rarely lose things now, and I feel so proud. It's great. Again, she's got a billion things on her channel if you go to Jessica's channel, but it's awesome. Any other tips for ADHD in here? Anybody want to share? Okay. All right, let's talk about the owls and the rabbits, right? The autism spectrum, where your interests might be a little more important than your social skills. And autism, again, has a lot of deficits, but it's got a lot of strengths too. Mostly communication deficits, verbal and nonverbal, sensory issues. All of these are common with ADHD as well, but not to the degree. And autism also can hyperfocus, but much more so than ADHD can. To the point that, yes, on Halloween, I was trying to get to a class to teach, and I saw one of my students, and I was like, oh my gosh, your costume's amazing. And I had the next half hour of her following me around talking about what version of Loki she was dressed as and why. And it was awesome, but it was also like, okay, you don't have to download the whole file right now. Well, anyway, Jake Barnett, he's in his 20s now. He has a PhD in astrophysics, and he's amazing. I got to sit on a panel with him a few years back at the UVU Autism Conference. But this is Jake when he was 13. He was on 60 Minutes because he started college at age 8, okay? And he was a nonverbal kid. But listen to him, again, talk about his autism here.
Told us that you're very proud of your autism.
That, I believe, is the reason why I am in college and I am so successful. It is the rise as to my love for math and science and astronomy, and it's the reason why I care. Otherwise, I wouldn't have gotten this far.
I don't know what's going on necessarily with the videos. I think sometimes this presentation is just so big, it can create issues with the transmission of the videos. I'm not sure, so I'll probably reduce a little bit of the videos. So I probably won't show you this one, but this is Rosie King, and you can look it up. It's free on YouTube. She did a TED Talk on her autism and why she wouldn't trade it for the world, because her autism is so closely connected with her imagination and who she is as a person and the amazing, unique person that she is. Let me show you one more. Any Big Brother fans in here? I don't watch reality TV. I don't watch much TV. But apparently, Brittany D'Angelo was a finalist on Big Brother, I think last year. And she is a kindergarten teacher in New Jersey who is also a nonverbal kid with autism. And now she talks like anybody else from Jersey. So very big talker. But listen to Brittany here as she talks about her autism.
Oh my gosh, I am honored to be answering this question right now. For me, I was diagnosed at 22 months old. Every single person upon my diagnosis, I was nonverbal, I had no eye contact, and I had no social cues at all. So for me, coming from being diagnosed at 22 months to sitting in this chair right now, being able to speak and come on Big Brother, what I say to everyone is, everyone can do this. Never give up on your dreams, never back down from a challenge. And if something's hard, that's okay. It's okay because it's gonna make you stronger in the end. For me, I have had to work harder than everybody else to get to this point, and so many people wrote me off. My mother calls me a miracle on a daily basis because me sitting here was not the plan. It just wasn't. So many people helped me along my journey. I am honored to even be sitting here right now in front of all of you, being able to speak on this. But for me, my autism has made me stronger. It has absolutely made me the strong, confident woman that I am today, and I am proud as hell of it. And I'm proud as hell of the journey that I've been on, because for me, it's my journey. And I'm proud of that. So be proud of your journey. Be proud of every obstacle you have to overcome, and be okay with the obstacles happening because they make you stronger in the end. But anyone can sit exactly where I'm sitting. I proved it this season. Ian, myself, everyone can do this. So for me, what I say is just never give up on your dreams. Always be authentically yourself, because you are amazing exactly the way you are.
So this is how that's who I want teaching kindergarten to my kids. But the diagnosed and research strengths of autism are amazing, right? People with autism tend to be better at learning in their special interest areas, memorizing in their special interest areas, visual and auditory processing in their special interest areas. and being able to like focus for very long periods of time, even on very small, detailed, quote unquote, boring things. This is a weird study. Okay, so they did a study last year that showed that autistics were better at driving than neurotypicals. They were more likely to follow the speed limit and to like, there was only one area that neurotypicals scored better than autistics, left turns, okay? Which made my wife laugh hysterically because I will go 1,000 miles to avoid making a right turn, or to avoid making a left turn. I'll make like 1,000 right turns to get there. And I hate driving, so I was really grateful to get picked up this morning and brought here. But so many other strengths, right? Ability with puzzles and maps, and the ability to thrive on routines or be good with music, to be honest, to be empathetic, curious, idealistic, perfectionistic, and to have the ability to systematize. Dr. Matran, recent data suggests it's time to start thinking of autism as an advantage in some spheres, not a cross to bear. Make a considered decision to ignore challenges, find ways to communicate, and then focus on strengths, says Dr. Stephen Shore. So many strengths. So if you're working with the autistic kids, again, help them avoid sensory overload. Most of the problems with autism, processing problems, meltdowns, behavioral issues, come from having too much sensory stuff going on. I'm lucky that this light is doing okay, because sometimes fluorescent lights and I do not get along well. But you'd be shocked how even just being in your classroom might be sensorily overwhelming. So try to find ways for them to communicate even that they need to have it a little less bright, or a little less loud, or a little less whatever, or a little more. They might need it brighter, they might need it louder, they might need whatever. Again, it's not just too much of things, it's too little will often happen with autism. Minimize social requirements when you can, like group work, icebreakers, any kind of unscripted or high pressure interaction. Try to give them a heads up and give them a script. One of the best things you can do as speech therapists is give your kid a script for things that they can do or say, to explain when they're having a problem, but also when they're trying to connect or make friends. The biggest deficit that I see with young adults with autism is how lonely they are. They're just often devastatingly lonely. Ironically, I'm one of those people with autism that if it was me and my books and my toys, I'd probably be fine, okay? I probably don't need other people. And yet, even then, I would still get lonely sometimes, right? And the key to a kid with autism's world is their special interests, okay? If my first grade teacher had been like, oh my gosh, Sesame Street, I would still be a friend of Mrs. Kapolchak's, as opposed to that weird kid that talked like Cookie Monster and Grover for the whole year.
Can I ask you a quick question?
Yeah, please.
Do you have an opinion on autistic people letting other people know that they're autistic versus not letting people know that they're autistic?
Yeah, my opinion is that it's the same as any other label. It's a personal decision. It has to be based on whatever. My neighbors, they don't know I'm autistic. My wife has even told me before, like, oh, I'm not sure I want you going on that show, because what if somebody watches it, right? Luckily, most shows talking about autism, nobody's watching. But but she's like, people are going to judge you, right? And I don't want that. So if you're in a situation where disclosure is going to like help you get an accommodation, then you need to disclose, right? So when my students get pulled over by the police, I'm like, if you even just sit there with your hands on the wheel yelling, I'm autistic, I'm autistic, I'm autistic, that's a good disclosure, okay? It really is. You laugh, but Lyndon Cameron got shot 11 times, okay, by the Salt Lake PD a couple years ago, right? So it's important to know when to disclose and how, and that's something else you can teach them. But in terms of using the label, a lot of times people don't understand it, and here's something I hate. I don't know if you've seen this in your schools, but when I was younger, because I'm old, we used the R word to express kids with disabilities. That was the word. And that was replacing moron, which was replacing idiot. You know? So, I mean, we keep trying to change it. What's the word now for kids that have special needs? The generic catch-all? Oh, they're autistic. And that's like really totally not cool or fair. And so, again, in those situations, telling people you're autistic isn't helpful. So what I'll tell them is this: disclose just a piece of what you need to disclose. Hey, I struggle with loud noises. I struggle with lights. So is it okay if I wear these dark glasses? Is it okay if I wear my headphones? Or, you know, I'm terrible with names. I'll come up with jokes, help them come up with funny ways to express even that they're terrible with names or whatever, but that they want to do it, because you don't need to fully disclose, right? I mean, if I walk up and I'm like, hey, I just need to talk to you for a minute and let you know, you may not be aware, but I have Asperger's syndrome, and Asperger's syndrome was named by Dr. Hans Asperger, who was a Nazi scientist during World War II, he worked with the Fuhrer, but he had kids that had schizophrenia, but they didn't have schizophrenia. He said this group of kids was different than the other kids with schizophrenia, and they had something else, and he came up with this new syndrome for it that's now incorporated into the autism spectrum. Nobody cares, right? Nobody's wanting that. I care because like one of my special interests is autism. But and I can talk about it all day. Like 3 hours on this is like nothing for me. I'm just sorry if this is a lot of time for you guys after Halloween. But we'll get to another break here soon. But the disclosure is important. So there's no right or wrong answer. They need to be able to say yes or no. And just like any other protected health information, if you guys are HIPAA familiar, they should be able to protect their diagnosis and not have to disclose if they don't want to. All right, but saying I have a challenge, that's what's really going on anyway, the time you want to tell somebody. If you get close to somebody, yeah, you might want to tell them, hey, I look at these things differently. But even just saying autism, unless they have a whole lot of context for that, doesn't mean anything, right? If I'd told people I had autism back in, the 1980s, they would have been like, oh, so you're like Rain Man, right? It's like, yes, I am exactly like Rain Man, Again, you've met one person with autism, you've met one person with autism. So it's very different with each. And great question, though. Letting them know when to tell people about their label can be a really useful communication skill. Yeah?
I think a lot of times you want to think of it as a person with something, not an autistic person.
Well, and that's another thing that people will ask me, do you prefer to be called autistic or a person with autism? And I personally don't care, but some people, it is a big deal. And so in the disability community and as part of the civil rights movement for neurodiversity, a lot of people with these kind of neurodiversities prefer to use disability first language. No, I am autistic, I am ADHD, I am dyslexic. And they want to use that because they want to show the world that having those labels is a great thing, and also that it's like, if this was autism, it's like, I am a person with autism, It's this little accessory I carry around with me, check out my autism, Whereas I'm an autistic person says every single moment of my life is colored by and affected by the fact that my brain processes differently. And so I'm okay either way. It doesn't offend me at all. And if I'm in a formal setting, I will say person with autism. But if I'm with other neurodiverse people, I am autistic, and that's fine. But ask them, right? Ask them what they want to disclose. Ask them how they want to disclose. Ask them how they want to identify even. Some of them won't be ready for that in elementary school. But helping them see, again, I have challenges and I have strengths. My challenges just happen to have a name. Everybody has challenges, right? What's your full name?
Jeffrey Glenn.
Jeffrey Glenn, okay. So I'm going to out him right now, but he has a terminal case of Jeffrey Glenn syndrome, okay? And he does, because there's never been a Jeffrey Glenn before, and there never will be again. And your unique combination of brain, body, experience, all of that, conditioning, means that you have something different than everybody else. And you have challenges? Yes, you do. And they're unique to Jeffrey Glenn syndrome. That's a hard one to say. We'll have to put you on a Glenn spectrum or something. Or a Jeff spectrum. There's a spectrum of Jeffs. There are. Sorry, we're going way afield. But the bottom line is this, again, all of us are different, and so being able to identify our challenges is actually a really cool thing. The fact that my challenges have a listing and a lot of research behind them helps me be able to navigate those challenges and know how to approach those challenges and how to help my son. Many people don't ever have anyone chart their challenges, and then they're struggling in the dark, okay? So it is what it is, but I don't know. I don't know if that's an answer to your question, but ask the person how they would prefer to identify and help them understand how they're to do that. Autism, it's a neurodevelopmental delay, makes it harder for us to communicate with others, to understand others, to filter sensory information out or abstract information, or to deal with things when there's uncertainty or difference or change. It makes it hard for us to act or react as neurotypicals would expect, or to create and maintain relationships with neurotypicals, and it's very unique to each person. Okay, I'm not going to go through the DSM, but you can look it up. One of the things I want to point out, though, with autism, and this is true of a lot of neurodiversities, symptoms must be present in early childhood, but may not become fully manifest until social demands exceed limited capacities. A lot of times it's, again, when life demands more than you're able to give, and so that's where I dropped out of school in junior high. My social skills were nowhere near where they needed to be for being a teenager. And thankfully, I was able to get through that. 5 major areas of deficit: social, communication, intense focused and interests, sensory sensitivities, over or undersensitive, and rigid routine and repetition, okay? So everybody's autism is going to look different. Everybody's development is going to be different. Development is going to be uneven. There is no one path for any neurodiversity on this is how everybody goes. Those 5 stages is about as close as you're going to get to like a single path that seems to be consistent. In terms of actual abilities, it's going to look different. What's this person's biggest challenges? Their focus interests, right? So they don't have any communication difficulties, but guess what they're doing? They're only talking about dinosaurs, okay? Or Pokemon, right? Japan is the land of autism, right? So almost autistic special interests come from Japan. And what we consider to be like autistic here is very normal in Japan, for the record, having lived there for a few years. B, again, here's somebody who's got a lot of sensory sensitivities and some communication issues, but guess what? If you're feeling overwhelmed and uncomfortable, you're not going to want to talk, you know? It just is how that goes, right? If it's 150 degrees outside, you're not wanting to talk to anybody, okay? That's just how it goes. If there's somebody blaring an air horn, you're not wanting to have a conversation right then, okay? So sensory sensitivities affecting communication, and this one is probably nonverbal, and of course has no sensory sensitivities, but that's probably just because they can't express them. Give your kids tools to express what's causing them pain, and especially, this is totally an aside, but one of the things I get asked to talk about most is sex education. And one of the things you've got to teach as a speech therapist, as someone who works with communication, is teach the child how to refuse and how to tell somebody if they got hurt somehow. They've got to have some way to communicate that. Those 2 things, if they don't have those, can set them up for exploitation and for a lot of pain that does not need to happen. Again, if you've met one person with autism, you've met one person with autism. Normal is a terrible word because it is a statistical anomaly. So let's talk about statistics for all of our people who love math in here. Normal just says if we had everybody in this room stand up and measure you guys by height, we would find that there's a range of heights in here. There are differences among human beings. Most human beings, their height falls in here, okay? If you're Shaquille O'Neal, your height falls out here. If you're my wife, your height falls out here, okay? She claims to be 5 foot, okay? But that's all it means. Normal is a statistical anomaly. Again, there's nobody in the world who is average height, average IQ, average skin color, average eye color, average grade level, average blah, 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 average age, nobody. If you were perfectly average in every measure, you would be this person right here, and you also wouldn't be normal at all. You'd be weird. Something would be really weird about you. A good rule of thumb for autism and for most neurodiversities, but autism in particular, is that you're going to find almost any characteristic off on the extremes. There's some overlap with the neurotypical middle of the bell curve, but they're going to be way over here or way over here, and that can be positive or negative depending on what we're measuring. Outliers means that you're not going to find any real patterns. You don't look autistic, right? I've been told so many times, well, you don't look autistic, or you seem so normal. Could you imagine if that was the best compliment you ever received? You seem so normal. That's not what a compliment is. Right? A compliment is, wow, you're exceptional. You stand out in this area. Okay? I asked my students, what do you say when someone says, you don't look autistic? I have one student, she was like, I say, and you don't look stupid, and yet here we are. And I laughed, and I was like, really, you say that? And she's like, no, but I really think about it. So, again, it's a disorder of extremes. Cognitive issues, again, we also tend toward extremes. Black and white. Okay, right or wrong, we tend to think of politics or morality or all that stuff. One of the best things you can teach your junior high and high school kids with autism, do not state non-tentative opinions. Strongly worded opinions turn people off. Strongly worded opinions make people not want to talk to you. Strongly worded opinions shut down conversation and relationships. Don't help them to see like, well, how would be a different way we could say that? And I know that's kind of a nuanced skill, but I see that over and over again. And my son, I'm struggling with it with him. He went to this homecoming dance recently, and this is the 3rd in a series of terrible, terrible dance experiences he's had. He's good at getting the girl to say yes, and then afterwards it's like, oh, that was awful. This one, he didn't even make it through the whole date. He's like, well, she was just kind of ignoring me, and I was like, I'm not letting this happen again. So after we were done with dinner, I just gave her ticket to the dance and said, you can go if you want, but you obviously don't want to go with me, and I'm out of here, and I left. And I was like, part of me is very proud of you, right? And part of me is like, so what happened? And when he was ready to process it, it turned out that he was making very strong statements about political systems and about people and you know, music he likes and doesn't like. And he's like, you're supposed to talk about what you like and don't like, right? And I'm like, oh God, when you make a statement like that, you're just turning her off, and watch her responses as she's like shutting down because she's like, I don't even want to talk to this guy about this, or that's offensive, or whatever, and you didn't even know you're doing that to her. Still, she should have talked to me, whatever. Anyway, we're there. We tend toward either obsession or apathy. If we have enough energy for it, we're going to be there 110%, but if we don't, we're going to be apathetic, okay? Just cannot muster if we can't muster enough energy to care 100%, we're not going to care. Hyper or hypo-rationality. So again, using my son, because he's not here. Hyper-rationality. Well, son, you'll feel it in your heart. Actually, Dad, the heart is an organ that pumps blood and oxygen and nutrients through the body and has nothing whatsoever to do with emotion and isn't even shaped like that, okay? Hyper-rationality. Same son. Son, you're 17. Let's get rid of your Lightning McQueen cars, okay? You don't play with them. They're just in a bin. And, you know, you're 17. These are little kid toys. Yeah, but it might hurt their feelings, Dad. So, again, same kid. So, routines were either too routine-oriented or not enough, over or under conscious of mistakes, etc. Oh, we got time. I'm going to show you this. This is way back in the day. There was a parody news network called The Onion. I showed you guys this, I think, last year, but it's worth watching again. This is autistic reporter Michael Falk, and they would just be like, we bring you now to autistic reporter Michael Falk, and he would give the autistic perspective on whatever. He has autism in real life, but he plays it up for the thing.
Autistic reporter Michael Falk joins us now with his interview. Nice to see you again, Michael.
I cannot see you, Brooke. I can only hear you.
Right.
Okay. Hello, Brooke. I finished speaking with Brian Wasserman 26 minutes ago, and I've been standing here since then waiting for you to talk to me. Watch that interview now. Brian Wasserman used to live in a very big mansion. Now he lives in a tiny jail cell. Is living in prison different from living in a 40,000 square foot mansion in Westchester?
Yeah, it's different.
How is it different from living in a 40,000 square foot mansion in Westchester?
Well, it's every second of my day is accounted for. It's just day after day of rigid routine.
Rigid routine. What is the rigid routine?
Well, we get up at exactly 6 a.m.
Yes.
Exactly 6:15 a.m. everyone is counted.
Counted.
Yeah, we have to line up 7 times a day to be counted.
Line up and be counted.
And then there's the food. I'd never tasted such terrible food.
How long do you have to stay in the line?
We have to walk in lines everywhere.
Do you have to make that line straight?
Oh, yeah. Well, frankly, I always thought you didn't have to do anything in prison, but we have a work detail, and it's hard. Just yesterday, I spent the entire day stacking crates, just one on top of the other.
I like to stack.
You do?
Yes, I like to stack crates, stacking crates.
Yeah, well, it's hard work.
Yes, stacking crates.
Yeah. I don't mean to complain, but
One on top of another,
I realize what I
on
did
top of
was
another, on
wrong.
top of another.
I just want to serve my time, and maybe I can get out of here and get back to my family.
Why do you want to get out of here?
For my family.
Can you stack your family?
What?
I want to be in prison.
No, you don't.
I want to be in prison.
No, you don't.
Yes.
You see, it takes its toll on you. Well, you wear the same clothes every day,
Yes.
and you live in this tiny little box,
Yes.
and
Yes.
and there's hardly any human contact.
How do I get to live here?
No.
How do I get to live here? I need
you
to go to
don't-
prison now.
I don't think you understand.
Now.
See, this is a scary
Now.
place.
Now.
I mean, sure, there are normal guys like me who are in here for
Now.
embezzling and fraud, but
that takes too long.
we
I need to go
also
to prison
have
now.
violent
I need to
offenders.
go now.
I mean, the guy in the next cell over, he robbed the convenience store and shot the cashier.
Robbed a convenience store.
Yeah,
I
so,
shot the cashier. Shot the
you know,
cashier. Okay.
I mean, it's a
Make sure the
scary
cashier's
place.
dead.
It's rough.
Make sure the cashier is dead.
We're exaggerating here for the sense of humor, but it really, again, rigid routines can be a great advantage to us, but also a real barrier. Autism is finding the needle before noticing the haystack. Autism tends to be really detail-oriented and misses the big picture. ADHD tends to be really big picture and miss the detail. Again, differences there. Sensory extremes. Again, we talked about these, but any sense can be into the extremes with autism. So be very aware of this, because this is the source of most meltdowns. To this day, if I melt down, it's probably because something sensory is going on. Again, we're not that differently wired, but be really aware of this. If you're encountering a problem with a child, make sure you've taken care of the sensory environment before you're dealing with anything else. This is also true of ADHD, not to the degree that it is with autism, but definitely take into account the environment that you're in with the kid. All of the different senses, not just the 5. Go through at least the 7 senses and maybe more. Both extremes, okay? Same student with autism. You come up to him and unexpectedly touch him, he'll jump right through the ceiling, okay? Same student came to me one day and he showed me his foot and he said, "Can you look at this? This kind of hurts." And his foot was like literally like green and infected. And he was like, "Yeah, it's kind of hurting." We had to take him to the hospital. He almost had to have surgery on his foot. He hadn't noticed it till the pain became a level that others wouldn't have seen. So again, there's certain things I need. So I have a bodily kinesthetic processing disorder, but I do not get enough kinesthetic input. And so when I talk, I'm going to move my hands a lot. And when I'm sitting, you'll see me drawing. And if I can pace, I'm going to pace because I need more of that stimulation, right? So I need more of the proprioceptive and kinesthetic. Everybody take your hands for a second. Just push your hands together kind of hard and just rub those hands together really hard. Is anybody that feels just amazing to in here? Got it? Anybody? It's totally amazing to me. Like, I will do this and I love this, and that's one stim that my son and I have in common. But even like tapping your leg or clicking a pen, that's saying that you're not getting enough sensory information, and so you're needing to add more. And so yeah, if they may have a deficit, right? So it's like, imagine senses as a cup, and that cup can be filled, right? And some people, like, their cup is already overflowing, right? And you may need to reduce the amount of sensory in that area. But a lot of us, our cup is really small. So you've ever seen like those kids with, like Temple Grandin, she made that hug machine, right? She needed that extra proprioceptive pressure, and that was really helpful for her because she didn't have enough there. The cup was really empty, or it empties really quickly. Does that make sense? Some people with autism love going to rock concerts. You could not drag me to a rock concert, even if it was a band I loved, because the noise level would just be no, absolutely no for me. But some people just love it. And again, extremes is the rule, not one particular. Most autistics will tend toward one extreme over the other, but they're both extremes you'll see. Most of us are, for instance, very introverted, but some autistics are the most extroverted people you've ever met in your whole life. So it's a great point. Yes, some kids really need more of it. So again, use their feedback to help see, oh man, if I'm going to get them working today, I've got to stimulate them. Okay? Everybody flap for just a second. Just try the flap. With autism, it's like, ooh, okay, yeah, I'm flapped. Does that feel good? Does it make anybody wake up a little? Okay, I got some people still flapping, right? Other people are like, no, don't ever ask me to do that again in public, right? Okay? Dr. Stephen Shore, he was like, yeah, I was on the plane here, and we were going through a bunch of turbulence, and then I realized, this plane is autistic. The wings are like doing this, and I was like, yeah, it was just cool. But anyway. Yes, please, go ahead. Yeah.
So I've been thinking about parents of kids who are autistic, and I have worked with parents who want me to keep working with their child and keep working with them until they are neurotypical, which is unrealistic.
And also
counterproductive.
counterproductive.
Any suggestions of things to say to parents to assist them in accepting or...
Yeah, so the question is, I'm working with parents. Parents want me to make their kid indistinguishable from the neurotypical. And what do I say to them? Because that's not only not possible, it's also counterproductive. Again, you guys remember Hans Christian Andersen in The Ugly Duckling? Trying to make him a duck is not helpful, right? And he's never going to quite fit in with the other ducks. Realizing he's a swan and helping him become the best swan he can be is going to be awesome, right? So we will get to that, I promise. And if we don't, ask at the end here. But I have a whole section of slides on this because I run into that same thing all the time. By the way, autism is genetic. Okay, it's like 90% genetic. It's one of the highest correlations with genetics. So if you're working with parents of an autistic child, guess what? There is a 9 in 10 chance that one of those parents is probably on the spectrum, probably undiagnosed, and they probably were never, therefore, able to celebrate the success so much as they wanted to blend in and become a chameleon who looked the same as everybody else, because that's helped them in their life. So even when they're saying this, know that it's coming from a really good place with those parents, right? The sensory stuff, though, because we're being overwhelmed sensory or not getting enough sensory, we tend to have some emotional issues, as anyone would if they were having too much or too little sensory, which makes it very hard to be socially aware, which messes our social skills and our other executive functioning skills. But sensory is kind of the basis, the foundation of all of it. This is Danny Reedy's theory, and I agree with him. Stimming, we just talked about stimming. Allow them to stim. Unless it's totally socially unacceptable, let them stim. Who cares if they flap, right? Unless they're like, I want to learn not to flap, who cares, right? Neurotypical stim all the time too, by the way. I'm seeing you guys out there, you know, with your phones, you're like playing with stuff on your desk, there's some feet tapping, there's some hair flipping, you know, water drinking. All of these things are stims. And stimming is awesome because it increases and decreases sensory levels, right? So like you were saying with your kiddo who likes the noise and likes the visual, stim to increase, not just decrease. Stim in a way that won't disturb others, okay? Nobody likes this person, right? I like that sound. I will talk to myself as well because I like to talk. Don't do that around other people. It sends a wrong nonverbal message. Stim with a sense not just required by the task. So there's no one stim fits all, right? People will be like, oh, we'll do the little fidget cubes or whatever, and sometimes that can work. But if you're doing something that requires that sense, you can't be stimming with that sense, right? So a visual stim won't work if you're supposed to be looking at something. An auditory stim is not going to work if you're supposed to be listening to something, et cetera, right? So keep one headphone in, but listen with the other ear or whatever. Any other tips or things on stimming? Don't punish the stim. Help them find a different way to meet that sensory need. They're trying to meet a sensory need. Don't punish stims at all. Sensory overlap also happens. My friend Shannon De La Rocha, hearing better when you wear glasses with tinted lenses. Synesthesia is a real phenomenon where the person with autism will often see colors or hear sounds or even have touch or taste or smell with a color or a number or a letter. So just being aware. And environmental changes can also be really painful. If I had time, I'd tell you those stories. Other extremes. Motor and musculature issues. Kid with autism is probably going to be really gross motor clumsy. And yet, as much as I hate sports, any soccer fans in here? World Cup coming up. Who's Lionel Messi? He's like the greatest, and he's diagnosed autistic. So Lionel Messi, diagnosed autistic, and his amazing gross motor skills. I have really good fine motor skills. I can write, I can draw, but yeah, I can't play a sport. Overly loose or tight muscle tone, involuntary movements or tics, and difficulty starting with things like any activity that requires a lot of muscle memory is going to be hard. So autism is ruining your perfect grade point average because of the stupid PE credit requirements for graduation. Right? Autism is being hugely relieved when people give up trying to teach you to ride a bike or swim because you took so long and failed so badly, right? And there are a lot of adult autistics who eventually figure this stuff out, but it tends to be delayed. I'm not clumsy, it's just the floor hates me and the tables and chairs are bullies and the wall gets... Okay, emotional extremes, right? Lori keeps talking about how, oh, I can't believe how calm Jared is. You have no idea what's going on behind this face, right? And that's called flat affect, that's really common. One of the communication skills, again, if I come back, I'd love to do a nonverbal workshop with you guys, but one of the greatest communication skills you can teach is how to communicate with your face, because I had to learn that through like drama classes and stuff. And even then, I'm not great at it. If I'm not focusing on my face, people are always like, are you okay? Like, do you need, are you angry? You know, like they're guessing at what because apparently my default screensaver face is not good. So, not that this face is much better. But we can't just, again, autism is extremes. We can't be just a little angry. We're going to get furious. We're going to break stuff. We can't just get a little sad. We're going to get really depressed. We can't just get a little happy. We're going to be like, oh my gosh, you know? So that emotional regulation is really important to teach as well. And we tend to, you know, say or do things without considering how those might emotionally impact other people, like my son. Back to Michael Falk. Autism is reporting on a group of missing hikers and predicting that they are definitely dead. Yeah. Given the wind chill tonight and the fact he's like, they are looking for the hikers. I know where they are. They are on that mountain and they are dead. And it is cold. Autism is reporting on a train accident, asking if the train is okay. Okay. Autism is collecting toys or whatever and then counting your collection as friends. And this is totally true, but it's totally cool. Last extreme here, so social extremes. And the social issues, again, this is critically, clinically what autism's known for, where our verbal and nonverbal don't match. We're doing too much social or not enough social. We're doing social wrong, or we have the right response, but it's really delayed. Any of those things you're going to see. Not able to know when the listener is interested or bored. Again, I'm talking about one of my favorite subjects, so I go all day. You guys are just going to start doing this because it's the day after Halloween. Okay? Failure to make small talk or see the point. We would much rather make big talk. Okay? Let us talk about important things or things that are important to us. It's like, I don't want to come in and tell you about my day or how this was. I want to talk to you about Pokemon and what I just learned about this new evolution for Pikachu, right? That's what I want to tell you. Help your students understand that small talk is about making neurotypicals feel comfortable. And that's not a bad thing all the time. Those darn neurotypicals, we've got to be nice to them sometimes. Autism has a strength with specialty slots. Like, we have really strong special interests, and those special interests can become careers, but we almost never pick one certain category of special interest. The exception to this is some biological females I've met who actually get really good at the social skills side of stuff, but it's manual, not automatic. How do you get them to focus on what other people are interested in and not just downloading their special interest? That is a struggle all the way through. You're not probably going to fix it in elementary school. For some people with autism, this never gets better until much, much later, like 40s, 50s, okay? Sometimes later. But it does get somewhat better. And they realize enough times that people don't want to sit there and listen to a half-hour explanation of what Loki you're wearing. So, but it's still there. Start with the turn taking. I hope that helps some, but yeah, really focus on that. That's a great, great question. Autism is calling in sick because there's a staff retreat. Okay. I never went to our staff Christmas party for years, and my boss thought I was just like a terrible employee until he realized I was autistic, and it was like, I've been with these people all day long and I'm done. Okay. I mean, it's great you guys want to have a party or whatever, but I have no desire. Are you going to play games there? No, I'm done. Right? Again, neurodiversity doesn't I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this. This is on your handout too, but neurodiversity doesn't come alone. Don't let one single piece of neurodiversity overshadow the others, and realize there may be other pieces. But also don't get overly pessimistic. You are working with the person at the lowest, weakest, most behind their peers point of their lives. And so it's easy to think like, oh my gosh, I have no idea how the future is going to be for this kid. You cannot know how someone will turn out. And we get way pessimistic when really even the most serious cases of autism get better with time. Okay? Who knows who Donald Triplett is? First case of autism ever. Okay? In 1938, he was 5 years old. Any guesses where Donald was? In a mental institution. He'd been there since he was 3 because he was hopelessly insane, apparently. Autism is based on Donald, right? Donald would flap his hands, he would spin things, he focused on objects instead of people, he didn't listen to adults, he was lost in his own little world. And in fact, that's what autism means. Autism means self-focused. Like auto means self, right? Like automobile, self-moving, right? And so Dr. Connor, who's the guy who came up with the diagnosis of autism, he found Donald in a Mississippi institution and said, Donald maybe shouldn't be here. He's different than these other people. Any guesses on how Donald turned out? He did not get any early childhood intervention. He didn't get ABA. He didn't get speech therapy. He was the first case ever. It's the 1930s and 40s. We had a world war to fight. Any guesses on Donald? This is Donald today. He is still alive. He graduated high school. He graduated college. He is a retired bank teller. Donald learned to drive at 27, got his driver's license. He's not a great driver. He's kind of awkward, but he does great. He still lives in this little town called Forest, Mississippi. Everybody in town knows him. They all know Donald's weird, and they love him. He, somebody got him a cell phone and taught him how to text, and he, prank texts the whole town and stuff. And he still has friends, and he still calls them by their numbers, but they, take it as a badge of honor that, oh, yeah, my number is this. That's the number Donald calls me. And he loves to golf, and he travels the world alone, but he is loved and accepted. You cannot know how someone's going to turn out. Mark this down. December 13th on PBS, they're going to have the world premiere of the documentary on Donald's life. My friend Karen Zucker put it together, and it's called In a Different Key. In a Different Key, the story of autism, December 13th. Watch it. I'm excited for it. So, we'll take 1 minute on this. 1 minute to yourself. I want you to think of your students, diagnosed or undiagnosed, and quickly Be like, where have I seen this autism? And maybe not your students, maybe your siblings or yourself or your parents or your uncle. You know that uncle. Take 1 minute. I want you to see it gets better. With transition, autism and all of these neurodiversities, they get better. If you look at outliers, people with autism tend to either get jobs nobody else wants or jobs that everybody wishes they could have, okay? And so you get professional writers. These are diagnosed adults with autism, like Pulitzer Prize winner Tim Page, or Nobel, or not Nobel, but Nobelo winner Orson Scott Card. Actors like Oscar winner Anthony Hopkins, or leisure and recreational people like Lionel Messi we were just talking about, the soccer player, musicians like Questlove, if you ever watched The Roots on The Tonight Show, he's autistic. Artists like Stephen Wiltshire, the human camera, or research and educational people like Vernon Smith, Nobel Prize winner, or technical people like Elon Musk, who happens to be slightly successful, and tons of people with really niche skills can make it. There is so much coming ahead. And so helping them see that they have a real plan for transition and what are they going to do after high school? And how are they going to keep building on the skills because they are developmentally delayed? Well, guess what? Being developmentally delayed is not a terrible thing, right? Animals are developmentally delayed humans are developmentally delayed compared to animals, right? I mean, how long does it take a dog to reach maturity? Like a year, maybe 2, and then it's having puppies. And you're like, oh wow, okay, I guess that dog is an adult now. Humans take longer than anything. Why? Because our brains need to develop more. But because of that, we have deeper and more connections with our brains, and we can do things that no other creature on planet Earth can do. Well, guess what? The autistic brain keeps developing about 10 to 20 years past the neurotypical brain, and that can be a real advantage. So as an adult, scarring can leave its mark. We often have anxiety and depressive disorders. We might be really lonely or whatever, or have some addictions to whatever. But it can also be an amazing time. Some things never quite get better, and that's fine. There's nothing wrong with that. You're going to be autistic your whole life. You're going to be anxious or depressed or ADHD in waves your whole life. It's going to be good and bad. And then realizing, again, end of life, you got to have a plan for. Let's move on. The piglets, okay? Anxiety disorders. How many people with anxiety disorders? How many people too afraid to tell anyone they have an anxiety disorder? Okay. Autism comes with anxiety disorders. Okay, I've never taken medication for autism. I have taken medication for 2 things, depression and anxiety. I don't now. After I stopped taking anxiety and depression medication though, and learned the systems to not be depressed and not to be as anxious as I was, and that's taken years, and I can talk to you about that if you ever want to, but the only medication I had to take was actually for gastroparesis, which is when your body can't move anything through the digestive system. My digestive system is a complete mess. Why? Because I had autism and anxiety for so many years, and I had no idea how to deal with it. What is the first thing anxiety shuts off in a stress response? Digestion, right? I'm running from this tiger, but I could really go for a sandwich right now. Nobody's doing that. Your brain is like, no, eat later if there is a later, right? So one of the first things that a stress response does is shuts off your digestion. So that's actually where I've had a lot of problems with that. So anxiety has really long-term things, but anxiety becomes over time a different brain wiring. It is a neurodiversity insofar that your brain is responding and processing differently with anxiety than it is when it doesn't. Many different kinds. Captain America almost wasn't Captain America. Okay, he turned it down at least 3 times, right? The legends are not clear exactly how many times he told Marvel, no, go shove it, I'm not going to be Captain America, because his anxiety disorder was so bad, and he just kept thinking about all of the things that, like, if I did this, and what if it hits, and then I'll have to do press, and I don't want to do press, and I don't want to go on these shows, and I certainly don't want to commit to 10 movies. I mean, oh my gosh, that's like years of my life, and I don't want to do this, and what if this happens, or what if my family gets too much public attention, or what if I can't be anonymous anymore, or what if? And turned down Captain America, and everybody in his life is like, Chris, you're an idiot, go do Captain America. And finally, through therapy, he was able to say, maybe the thing I'm most afraid of is telling me that that's the biggest payoff possible in my life, right? Because the highest risk means highest possible reward. And he's like, I'm going to try this. And he's like, the first month or so shooting, I was just like dying. He's like, I was not sure this was the right choice. But he's like, but in retrospect, this was great. Again, if we had time, I'd show you this clip. He talks about how anxiety can actually help him as an actor to just like, boom, he's just there, 100,000% centrally into it right there. He's on. and that those are the best moments. And he talks about how to help anxiety and his own shh system. That is, his brain makes all this noise, and that's how he labels it. It's just brain noise. He talks about how being able to take that brain noise and just shush gives him enough distance from it. It doesn't make it go away, doesn't make the what if stop, but it allows him to say, okay, what's really going on behind all of this noise? What's really going on? What are my risks and my rewards? And then be able to take that action. Anyway, let's go to the Eeyores. Let's go to depression, and then I'll show you the strengths of anxiety and depression have a lot of overlap in the research. So I'll show you those. I don't want to say by show of hands who's had depression, but most people have had depression at some point in their life. Most people have at least one depressive episode. Again, if you haven't, God bless you. Hopefully it doesn't happen. But the times I've been depressed, I have the major depressive disorder. And so when it hits big and it hits hard, and like getting out of bed, doing simple things like showering, like become almost impossible. And all the things I love to do, okay? Suddenly I don't want to read or build with Lego. Could you imagine, right? So like all of those things, those loves go away. Depression is a horrible, dark, awful, gloomy place. And I think one of the reasons most people really love Eeyore is we can relate in a lot of ways to the way his brain works. But can depression be a strength? Yes. And I hope this video works because this guy here is interviewing Lily Singh. Lily is a social media influencer and a talk show host and a best-selling author. And she wrote a book, and she talks in there about her depression. When she got out of college, she became horribly clinically depressed. And she started her YouTube channel just to try and get herself to laugh and be stupid and do something to get her brain off the depression. But watch her talk about how it's helped her.
There was something else. Ask you about it, and you said that a boss is somebody that is hurt efficiently.
Yes.
And I thought, whoa, what does that mean? How does one...
Yeah, it's kind of, another way of saying it is that there's no failures, there's lessons. I mean, that's another way of putting it. But it's just this idea of when I reflect back in my life, and I think about all the times I really became a better person or a smarter person, it's because of something that was very hurtful or painful or an unpleasant experience. And now I think very often in the future now when I'm through those experiences, that's inevitable. We're all gonna get heartbroken over and over again. We're all gonna deal with failures all over again, but it's how we think about those moments in that moment. So I've kind of trained my brain to allow myself to be upset when I'm heartbroken and allow myself to feel failure, but not be down in the dumps about it for too long. Not be like, oh, well, I'm worthless, or oh, well, this is just how it's meant to be and the world's against me. Getting hurt efficiently means we're hurt. How can we efficiently learn a lesson in this moment? What could I have done differently? What could I have expected differently? How could I have reacted differently? So that the next time you will be heartbroken, which you will be, it's inevitable, you're better equipped to deal with it.
So you've got a lot of codifications, ways of conceptualizing life and how things are and how you should react to them. You talk about getting control of your mind. Where did you begin to put all of this stuff together, and what are some of the really important parts of your code of beliefs?
You know, it's funny, when I was writing my book and I was sitting in my room all alone, I thought, oh my God, I think I'm really smart. Honestly, I was writing all this stuff, because like these are all things I've done in my life and experiences I've had, but it wasn't until I was compiling them in a book that I thought, oh, these are just organized lessons of my life. And so the book writing experience was liberating for me and very educational for me as well. And I'm so glad that people that read it feel the same way. But the code honestly came from being unhappy. That's the truth. I think I learned how to be happy because I know what unhappiness felt like. And I was able to dissect all the reasons I was unhappy, you know, all the reasons, one of them, blindly following my sister, doing what she was doing, listening to everyone else except myself, not paying attention to all the signs my mind and body were giving me saying, we're not doing the right thing. And I think having so much experience in that dark phase really helps you become better, because how can you become better if you don't know what the worst version of yourself is?
And what
version of yourself is? I learned to be happy and learned what happy looked like because I knew what unhappiness was and how it looked, right? Again, I'm not there with my depression, but that's transformation. That's her saying, because of my depression, I am grateful for what I've learned. I'm grateful for the wisdom I've gained, and I'm grateful now that I can share that with others, and I can do these things and learn how to be happy because I've seen the opposite of that, right? And I think that's really, really, really cool. And so even though, I'm sorry, the quality of the video, So many strengths actually are associated with anxiety and depression, which you wouldn't think. But people who have been through anxiety and depression tend to be more compassionate. They tend, because again, they know, like, oh, I've been hurt, and I know what that feels like. I've been alone, and I know what that feels like. Yeah, question?
I'm just wanting to make a quick comment on this. Anxiety and depression to me is a lot like autism for you, where it's not a phase, it's not something that you just go through.
You don't just like carry it? Yeah.
It's just part of who you are.
It is.
It's not something you can just say, oh, I went through this and now I'm over it. It's actually, it is who you are.
Yes, and thank you for calling me out on that. The reason I'm including it in neurodiversity is it literally becomes a part of your wiring and who you are. And it's not something that goes away. It'll come in waves, usually. I'm having lower high anxiety today. I'm having lower high depression today. And again, and you never know when that next wave is going to come necessarily, but you get better at anticipating those waves. And even while you're dealing with them, when you're not completely overwhelmed with your anxiety or depression, you tend to be more compassionate. You tend to be more open. So thank you for correcting me on that. Sorry to get a little ableistic on y'all. Better at coping, better at solving problems, because again, they're learning to like look ahead and to see like what might be an issue here and how to deal with that. Again, better with relationships when they're able to focus on those relationships, or managing stressful situations. They've learned how to say no. They've learned how to value other people. They've learned, this is a weird one, they tend to be better at detecting deception. They become less gullible and more easy to spot when someone is lying to them. They don't see the world with those rose-colored glasses anymore. They're not blinded by that. And yes, creativity. A lot of the most creative people on planet Earth experience chronic anxiety and depression. And some of the best authors and creators out there. Depression is part of the human nature, the design of human nature, and just because it's painful doesn't mean it's bad or without its uses, says Dr. Thompson. The research is showing that, yeah, even that can be there. You are working with a lot of kids who are in special needs. How many of you work with kids who have problems with anxiety or depression, right? And the older the kids get, the more likely they are to experience depression. And your ability to work one-on-one with them and teach them to communicate can save lives. The rates of suicidality of people with neurodiversity are somewhere between 2 and 9 times higher, depending on the study, than neurotypicals for suicide. And part of that is the inability to communicate, right? Suicide is not so much about I don't want to live, it's I don't know how to live, right? I don't have the skills to keep going here. And if they can't talk about it and if they can't find some way to cope with it, that can be life-threatening, because the only way they have left to communicate, the only thing left that honors their autonomy, is taking their own life. The leading cause of death in Canada for my age group is euthanasia. It's self-selected suicide, which is legal in Canada. Again, you could make the difference. Try to catch that with the kids you're working with. Help them to understand that their emotional place is important to you, and that some days, if they can't handle it, we're going to do something else today. But we're going to come right back to studying again, but we're going to do something else. We're going to have a little bit of fun. We're going to take some time to calm down, or to process what's going on with you emotionally, or give you some words to express the emotion you're feeling. How many of your kiddos don't even have the words to say, these are the emotions I have? And you can do it pictorially, right? You can get those cards that show all the different faces and that have the different emotions on the faces, right? I can send you stuff if you need. But there's so many things you can do to help with this. So know it's real. Anxiety and depression are very real. They're not making it up. Yes, it's normal, but really it shouldn't be to the degree that a lot of our kids experience it. Help them reduce stress levels and demands. Keep things very predictable and certain. This is good for all students. Try to avoid their anxiety triggers if you can. Teach them some ways, again, to communicate with their body, to do some breathing, to do some mindfulness, right? Everybody just close your eyes for a second, just for a second, and take a deep breath in through your nose, okay? Let your belly expand. And just hold it for a second. Think of a place that's really cool to you, and then slowly let it out through some pursed lips. Okay? And you do that 2 or 3 times, even maybe at the beginning of your lesson, and watch how even the kids with ADHD start calming down a little, right? Give them some ways to start bringing down their emotional levels. Allow them to retreat when they're overwhelmed, but don't let them just stay retreated. Bring them back in as soon as you can. Don't try to fix it. And if they're really feeling depressed, summarize, hey, you're feeling this, right? Check and correct your understandings. Empathize, yeah, that's pretty rough. What are you planning to do? Proceed to share, if they're ready, what you might recommend for them. But don't just jump in with your recommendations. Make sure you're really validating first. And then get professional help. There should be counselors in the school. There should be family members who are contacted. Again, that little girl with autism who killed herself in Salt Lake, and whose name I'm going to kick myself all day because it'll come to me as soon as I'm done. Little girl in Davis County who committed suicide just a couple years ago, if you saw that on the news. Again, they need that help. So I don't want to be a downer on this. Depression can be a lifelong condition that actually is very mild, but is constant, kind of the Eeyore system there. And it doesn't have to ruin a life. But it does mean that there needs to be some special accommodations there. So, bottom line, all of these neurodiversities are just labels. Our life is not a label. No human being can be summarized with just labels and labeling. And people with neurodiversities need to see that their label has positives, not just negatives, and that there are strengths and that there are things they can look forward to even when it seems like life is overwhelming or hopeless, or I'm not like everybody else, or I'm feeling behind, which they often feel. And there's a link to my class presentation on that. So let's take another quick break here because it got a little heavy and a little long. But think about some of these strengths. And again, refer to your handout if you want to. But how can I help my students be aware of the strengths of their unique brain? And again, I've given you the general research strengths. But how do I use that? How do I build on that? How do I build my lessons around that? How do I build my interventions around those strengths so they can reach transformation? Go ahead. Take 3 minutes on this one and go from there. We'll go through some stuff, but I want to leave time for questions, and I want to make sure we're doing something practical. But go ahead and wander back to your seats again and hang in there. Again, you can tell Lori I don't have to come back again next year, but, or at least I don't have to go 3 hours, but this is fun stuff for me. Anybody find anything as you talk about building on strengths, any strengths that stuck out to you that like, oh my gosh, yeah, that is a strength my kiddo has, or I've seen that, or here's how I built on that. Any insights from answering these questions you want to share? Yeah.
I really liked how a lot of the overlap I felt was with compassion. And
Yeah.
Increased ability to have empathy for other people. I think I definitely see that with some of my kids too.
Right, there's nothing like going through really hard times that teach compassion. And so compassion is going to be a strength you'll see over and over and over. And don't discount that. Would this be a better world if everybody had more compassion? Holy crud, yes, especially right now, right? There's just not much compassion in the world. And so if you see kindness in your kid, reinforce the crud out of that, because it's so critically important that we live in a world that has that compassion. I love that. Thank you. Other strengths that you saw or that you want to build on or point out more to your students? It is easy to become frustrated working with Pooh and Tigger and Owl and Piglet and Eeyore, okay? It is extra frustrating because you have to get through some of that presentation to really be able to connect with the person. But as we really focus on the strengths and on building on those strengths, you can become good at connecting with anybody regardless of their neurology, regardless of their wiring, and again, helping them learn how to communicate. And that's great practice for all of us. So thank you guys for doing what you're doing.